So let's get right into it. The 1MDB scandal. Was this a massive, complicated political scheme to frame a prime minister? Or was it just one of the biggest, boldest financial heists we've ever seen? That's what we're breaking down today. It's an incredible story. We're talking about mind-boggling wealth, absolute political power, and a money trail that literally snaked its way across the entire planet.
$4.5 billion. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the number at the very heart of this whole thing. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, that's how much money was systematically stolen, siphoned right out of Malaysia's state-owned investment fund, 1MDB. And the real kicker? This was a fund that was created, supposedly, to help the Malaysian people. And this really sets up the two completely different stories we're going to hear. On one side, you've got the defense from the former Prime Minister, Najib Razak. His claim, this was all just political sabotage, a frame job. But then you look at the other side. You've got the unanimous decision from Malaysia's highest court, and they saw it very differently. They called it, and I'm quoting here, a simple and straightforward case of abuse of power. So, which one is it? What really happened?
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we've got to go back to the beginning. How did a fund that was supposed to develop a nation end up at the center of a massive global corruption investigation?
So first off, what even was 1MDB? Well, it was set up back in 2009. It was a state-owned company, and its whole mission was to kickstart economic growth from Malaysia. Sounds good, right? But here's the detail that changes everything. The chairman of this fund was also the Prime Minister, Najib Razak. And he didn't just have a say, he had the only say. He had sole authority to sign off on every single investment. And you really have to remember that point, because that incredible concentration of power, it's the key to this entire story.
Now, you'd think that to steal billions of dollars, you'd need some kind of super complex, genius-level financial scheme, right? Well, that's not what happened here. In fact, the U.S. Department of Justice called the fraud brazen and crude. The real genius, if you can call it that, wasn't in the crime itself. It was in the cover-up. The whole thing worked because they used immense political power to basically shut down anyone who was supposed to be watching the money.
So, the big question is, how did they do it? How did they actually pull this off? Let's take a look at the mechanics of what prosecutors ended up calling the perfect heist. I mean, really, how do you make $4.5 billion just vanish?
Well, U.S. investigators broke it all down into three main phases. It kicked off with what they called the Good Star phase. That's when $700 million got diverted into a shell company, a company controlled by this financier Joe Low. Then, things got even bigger with the Abar BVI phase. We're talking more than $2.7 billion from bonds that were backed by Goldman Sachs, just siphoned away. And then, the final phase, the Tenora phase. This is where it gets incredibly brazen. Over $700 million went straight into the Prime Minister's personal bank accounts. I mean, the money trail was right there.
Okay, so where did all that cash end up? This is where the story goes from, boring financial documents to just pure Hollywood spectacle. We're talking a $250 million super yacht, luxury penthouses in New York City, priceless paintings by Monet and Van Gogh, millions and millions in jewelry. And get this, some of the money was even used to finance the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. You can't make this stuff up. A movie about financial crime paid for with stolen money.
But, a scheme this big, this bold, it can't stay a secret forever. Eventually, the walls start to close in. So, let's talk about that moment, the moment the dam finally broke.
That moment came in 2015. It was investigative journalists from the Wall Street Journal and an online site called the Sarawak Report who dropped the bombshell. They published these absolutely explosive reports, and they didn't just make accusations, they laid out the evidence. They traced a massive flow of money, over $700 million, directly from companies linked to 1MDB right into the Prime Minister's personal bank accounts.
So what was Najib's response to this? Well, here's what's so interesting. He didn't actually deny that the money landed in his account. Nope. Instead, he immediately went on the offensive. He called the whole thing a conspiracy, political sabotage, a hit job designed to kick him out of office. And that narrative, that became his go-to defense for years.
And feeling the pressure, he used the full power of his office to try and shut the story down at home. Anyone who questioned him was in trouble. He fired his own deputy prime minister just for asking questions. He took the official audit of 1MDB and stamped it official secret so no one could see it. Then he replaced the attorney general, and guess what? The new guy promptly cleared him of everything, putting out this story that the money was just a friendly donation from the Saudi royal family.
So it looked like he had managed to smother the investigation inside Malaysia. But this story was far from over. Because years later, after a truly shocking election loss, Najib Razak would finally have to answer for all of it in a court of law.
And when he finally got to court, the new prosecutors made a really smart move. Instead of trying to untangle that whole messy, multi-billion-dollar global web, they went small. They focused on a single, much simpler transfer, about $10 million that came from a 1MDB subsidiary called SRC International. Why? Because the money trail was short, direct, and way easier to prove in court.
So in the courtroom, his defense just completely fell apart under scrutiny. His team was arguing two things at once. One, that he was framed by Joe Low and the bankers, and two, that the money was a legitimate Arab donation. And the court just wasn't buying it. They called the defense completely inconsistent and incoherent. I mean, the judges basically said, look, these two stories are diametrically opposed. You can't be a victim of a scam and believe the money is a real donation at the same time. And that massive contradiction, it was fatal to his entire case. And the fallout from all this, it was nothing short of historic. First, in May 2018, the scandal led to him losing the general election, which ended an incredible 61-year streak of his party being in power. Then, a couple of years later, he was convicted and sentenced to 12 years behind bars. By August 2022, he'd lost his final appeal and was actually in prison. But, and this is a big but, in a super controversial move just this year, a pardons board suddenly cut his sentence in half.
And that decision, that brings us to the messy, complicated final chapter of this whole affair. This is where the lines between justice and politics get really, really blurry. Because look, on the one hand, you can't deny that the 1MDB scandal was a huge win for accountability. It unleashed what people called a democratic tsunami. It led to the first change of government in Malaysia's entire history, and it sent a powerful message that no one, not even a prime minister, is above the law.
But then, you have the other hand. And that's where the story gets really complicated. That decision to cut Najib's sentence in half, it caused an absolute uproar. Anti-corruption groups were furious, calling it a travesty of justice and a huge step backward for the rule of law in the country.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem that's still lingering today. See, while one man did go to jail, the bigger systemic problems that allowed this to happen in the first place, they're mostly still there. Power is still incredibly concentrated in the Prime Minister's office. And here's the ultimate political irony. The current government, which ran on a platform of reform, actually needs the support of Najib's own party to stay in power. And as you can imagine, critics say that makes it pretty hard to push for any real deep anti-corruption reforms.
Which all leads to this final nagging question. The courts gave a clear verdict. Najib Razak was guilty, no doubt about it. But when the very system that made such a massive crime possible is still largely in place, can you really say that justice has truly been served? It's a tough question, and it's one that Malaysia, and honestly, all of us watching from the outside, are still trying to figure out.